Welcome to the Creative Blood podcast. I'm your host, Laura Conway. If you've ever wanted a backstage pass into the world of creativity from the best in the business, this one's for you. Get ready to hear genuine conversations with the artists, entrepreneurs, and creative minds who know no boundaries. Here we go.
I'm always following what's the most terrifying thing to do next that I can't stop thinking about. And that's always what's led me to the next project. It's like following the terror, but also following the exhilaration that comes with stepping into the unknown.
That's Alex Prager, Emmy award-winning artist and filmmaker who creates elaborately staged scenes that draw inspiration from a wide range of influences and references, including Hollywood cinema, experimental films, pop culture, and street photography. She deliberately casts and stages all of her works, merging past and contemporary sources to create a sense of ambiguity. Alex has received numerous international awards, exhibits her work globally, and she is represented by the Lehman Mopping Gallery worldwide. Her work is in the collections of New York's Whitney Museum of American Art, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, as well as many more international, public and private collections. Alex and I met back in the early 2000s, in our 20s, way before I knew anything about her picking up a camera. We were living and breathing a thriving East LA music scene, cans of Tecate from Echo Park's infamous dive bar, The Little Joy, and a mosh pit of creativity in every direction. Speaking from LA, inside her deliberately sparse home studio, Alex describes how the electricity she felt from a William Eggleston photograph set her on a life's mission to create, and explains why the fighting spirit she connects with daily to channel her fiercely focused inner boxer mindset is so necessary. This episode really captures Alex's love of the world that she gets to play in every day. Get ready to feel her undeniable passion, dedication to the craft, and sheer focus that is required to juggle multiple mediums at once. When Alex Prager paints a picture in words, it's loud and clear how what we put out there into the world is terrifyingly close to who we are inside. She's a force, a total inspiration, all over the details in every direction, and she's all yours for the next 38 minutes. Enjoy.
Makes me so sad and nostalgic.
I know. About the Tecate.
The Tecate in particular.
That was a very, very special time for me as well. Sort of, like I said, like such a mosh. It felt for me, my personal experience, it was such a total mosh pit of creativity, a sort of a thriving time for people just really being themselves creatively. It's almost like it was unapologetic because it wasn't for anything other than just being you. And I wish I'd known you were shooting back then. I was actually really curious, like, if you were when we met originally. Were you taking pictures? I didn't know that.
I was. I mean, my timelines about things are pretty hazy.
So are mine.
Time is a very complicated issue with me because it really doesn't, like, time and space kind of exist only in how I need them to exist in a way, which is really frustrating, especially for my husband, because we're late for a lot of things. Because
that's called Jewish time. It's like being called, working on Jewish time.
But I do. So I picked up a camera when I was 21, and I had my first kind of DIY show when I was 21 as well, 6 months later. I can tell you that story later. But
where was that? Where was that show?
It was in Beverly Hills at my friend's space. We had a one night only show where we just invited everyone that we knew, and we told them to invite everyone they knew, and we basically like asked our friends if we could take their address books for the afternoon, and we called every single person in it that had an LA zip code. and we invited them to our one night only art show. And I didn't feel like I was ready to have a show then, because I'd only picked up a camera 6 months earlier. But my friend had been shooting photography for maybe 5 years or something at that point, and she was scared to do the show on her own. So she convinced me to show a few pictures in the back room of this very big Beverly Hills loft that she managed to convince her friend to lend us for the night. And
wow.
And I sold a picture that night, and actually sold a few pictures that night. And most of the pictures I hung on the wall were black and white, but I sold one of the color pictures that I made. And it meant a lot to me because that was the one that I had had the most fun making, but it also meant the most to me because it was a connection to my childhood in a way. And I managed to stage an image that was meaningful to me in an emotional way. And so when someone bought that image for $300, I kind of acknowledged that there was something about this image that resonated in someone else too. And that connection was really important to me that night. And from that point on, I went that direction with photography, and I never made a black and white image again. So that's why I tell people that having shows and having an audience for your work is really important, because, and you're never going to be ready to have your first art show, and you're never going to be ready. I never feel like I'm totally ready to have my show. I don't think any artist ever does, but it's really important, less about showing your work and more about having that interaction with an audience and seeing if your work is resonating the way you intended and how it's resonating with people. That's a really important part of having shows.
I think that's, again, it's so important to share that kind of thing because, like you said, no artist is ever ready to show a piece of work or to get on stage as a musician, for example. You're always thinking, I could have rehearsed a few more times, or the setting isn't what it's been in rehearsals. I feel like it's such a fabulous time to create when you don't know what's possible in terms of the conditions, because like you said, you just grab the address book. And the best thing about LA that everybody must know who's listening to this is, as in needs to know, is that I don't know who you called, but there would have been some killer phone numbers in those address books, because LA is just one of those places that you end up, I don't know, probably I'm hoping someone called Juliette Lewis or something.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Drew
scene,
Barrymore was there, and it was a fun night. It was a fun night.
Do you remember who you sold the piece to?
I do
not. Was it
not.
a friend or somebody? No.
No, it was a random. That's another reason it felt more special.
Yes.
Yeah, I sold a few pieces that night that really made me, because I didn't know what to expect. And I sold a few pieces that night that really, each piece I sold made me think about what I was doing in a different way. And it got me to come back to photography, a changed woman, because that's what shows do. I mean, I don't know how it is. Musicians play so much more than, artists have exhibitions, but it must be different every night because your audience is different.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone in the room, if there isn't, depending on the energy of the space, depending on sort of where also I think your head's at on the night, because something might have happened just before the show for you as an artist, and who knows what happened before you walked through the door that evening of the show.
Yeah, that's one thing that that also when I started having exhibitions in London and places outside of the US, that's just one thing that really, it's so cool about being an artist, is how the class systems just completely disappear for artists. Because I found myself talking to someone that had maybe just bought a piece for my show, and somebody that I would have nothing in common with, I have no understanding, no reality with, or I would imagine that I would have no reason to talk to this person normally, or we would have no reason for our paths to cross, except there was something in my work that I made that resonated with them in a personal way, enough to make them want to own it and look at it every day for the rest of their lives, potentially. And that's a connection. That's a human, emotional connection that brings us together and makes us share a common reality. So going back to what got me to get into photography in the first place, it was this energy that I felt in the work of William Eggleston. I showed up at this William Eggleston show, and I'll tell you more about how I got there. But just since we're on the subject, I showed up at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, and I saw this piece of work, and I really felt like a piece of Eggleston was somehow in that work of art. When I was looking at it, I felt his energy. I felt it was a live energy that was resonating back with my energy. And it was a two-way flow of energy. And I really felt that. And that was the moment that I was like, what the fuck is this magic? This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Whatever is going on here, I didn't understand what was going on, but he had done it for me, and I felt it, and I was picking it up the way that, that electricity flows through copper, and I felt that. I feel like since the internet became as widely used as it is, I feel like there's kind of a wash of Instagrammable homes and offices now that probably didn't exist before, because now everyone's looking at the same inspiration on Pinterest and Instagram, and it's sad. It's like, it's made people more hip and more, look like they have more style in a way, but you can always sort of feel the deadness that lies beneath it, because it's a facade for, this is just me being critical of that kind of aesthetic, but I'm really not a fan of that when you don't really feel the person, no matter if you like it or not, or if it's your thing or not, when you can't really feel the person's, personal touch on the space, then it's sad, because I think it's a sign of the internet times that we live in. Everyone's got the same, record player in the corner that they probably never use, and I don't know. There's just a whole look that when I walk in, I see that, and it's just kind of sad, because I prefer the weirdness and the eccentricities and just the little surprises that tell you who a person is.
Definitely.
In the way they made up their home or office.
Would you be happy to sort of give a visual of the environment?
Yes. So my environment, I think it's unlike what people would probably imagine, because I think a lot of artists like to listen to music when they're working, and they like to have a bunch of inspiration up. And and I actually, I'm actually a little bit of a psycho when it comes to my focus, because I have so many different mediums now that I'm compartmentalizing and juggling within a single day, because I make my photographs and films for my exhibitions, my art exhibitions. And then I make commercials as well every once in a while. So I'm pitching and making treatments for those sometimes. Yeah. Only when I really like the project. And okay. I'm writing a screenplay right now with my sister. And I'm prepping another film project right now. So I have to be, and the deadlines on all of these are pretty intense, usually. And I like it that way. So my space has gradually, from the moment I began photography from when I was 21 to now, has gradually gotten more and more sparse and more minimal, which is why you'll see a white wall behind me and white linen curtains, Belgian linen, that I picked out myself and had them made. And then I have a big light bulb for a lamp on my desk, and my rotary telephone. And I have this picture here that is a picture of a boxer who's all bloody. and he's staring right at the camera. And I bought this picture from an artist off Instagram. And it's the only piece of art I have in my home office, and it's the reason I bought it is because this is how I feel when I'm working. I'm going I'm in the middle of a ring, and I'm fighting with every ounce of energy that I've got, and it doesn't matter how bloody I get and how tired I get. I'm still going because it means so much to me what I'm doing, and I love it so much, and I feel that. And then when I look at this picture, I feel like it's me when I'm working.
I love it. It's got, oh my God, it's so intense.
Yeah, it's so intense.
It's got a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it needs probably, because that's got so much energy, having the neutral environment for it to have the space that it needs. It's like you only need something, it doesn't need anything else on the wall, does it?
Mm-mm. No, it's
intense.
Great. And I see it right when I'm walking in. And then I've made a little corner of my garage into a cubicle with these little wooden slabs. So I actually walk through a small space, and where I see the boxer hanging there, the fighter, and I see him before I sit down and just work in my very minimal kind of space that with no music and no sound. It's very quiet in here. I put carpet down, so it's and curtains all along the walls, so it's very quiet, soundproof. And that's how I work. A little bit like a psycho.
It's so unique to you. That's the best bit. That is so unique to your process. Just like deathly silence in order to get in the ring.
Yes.
And go into battle.
Yes. And it needs to be very quiet and sparse. Nothing can distract me because it's all going on in my head. So I almost need the world to disappear so I can just go inside and take what's in there and try and start articulating it onto the screen or onto the paper.
I love it. It's, that is really, thank you for describing that, because you've just given quite a visual. So obviously you've had a remarkably rich career with numerous accolades in the last decade. I mean, to say the word decade, just that in itself feels surreal. Because when I say or think decades, I always think the 90s, and that's awkward. Do you ever think about the points in your career that have gotten you to this point? Do you ever think, God, if I hadn't sort of made that decision? Or are you always very much living in the moment? Because obviously the detail that you give your work, one might think, I say this with a lot of love, because I can personally be a bit, I refer to it as the spectrum. As people who really sort of fly just under the spectrum of being so detail orientated. And in order to be that detail orientated, you are constantly processing everything so intensely. How do you, if you sort of think about where you've been in the last 10 years or how you've gotten to this point, you look cool as a cucumber when I'm asking you this question, but do you ever think about it? Because it's been such a fierce trajectory in a lot of ways. Does that sound right to you?
I think the only time I ever think about it is when I'm forced to think about it when I do interviews with people that want to talk about the past. And it's cool. It's really the only time. Even Lisa, my studio director, we get so caught up in the future because we always have another project on the go, and we're always juggling more than one project. And every once in a while, she even has to stop and remind the both of us that we need to break out a glass of champagne and toast because we just finished a crazy project. And even though we're already on to the next one, so we didn't even acknowledge that we finished that project, and who even fucking thought we would ever be able to finish it. It was so intense when we were in the middle of it. By the time we're done, we're already on to the next one. So there's very little thought even to acknowledge the ones that are right behind us from a month ago or even a day ago, because we're already on to the next one. So, it's been so fun though. And the only time I ever think about it really is when I'm doing things like this. And every once in a while it comes up because something is so coincidental that it just has to be acknowledged. Like when I was 8 years old, I think I was 8, maybe I was 9, but I was on an episode of Tales from the Crypt. this TV show. It's one of my favorite TV shows. So, the director was Kevin Yeager, and it was one of the coolest experiences I had as a kid. I only acted for a few years. It was something all of my classmates were doing, and I did it for the craft services. And but I ended up on an episode.
God bless the craft services.
Yeah, right. And also to get off school and everything. And I ended up on an episode of Tales from the Crypt working with a two-headed monster that was made with practical effects and animatronics, and a mummy and they ended up, spoiler alert, but they ended up having sex, and the Crypt Keeper was born from them.
Whoa.
So it's a very important episode. And I had one whole line with one word. And, but the reason this came up...
Hold on. Hold on.
Okay.
What was the line?
The line... Are you ready for it?
Ready.
Here. That was my line.
Wait, hold on a second.
Here.
As in, here, I'm passing you something.
Yes.
Or here, come this way.
As in, here, I'm passing you something.
That is quite a line.
I was on set all day for this line. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But the reason this came up recently, so the past reemerges, is because the very special effects artist that I worked with recently for my show at LACMA, it was a collaboration I did with Miller Lite, where they commissioned me to do like 15 sculptures, life sculptures, and of an office holiday party. And I worked at many offices when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I basically got to imagine the last office holiday party. So I did this exhibition at LACMA because they weren't able to have their normal holiday party, and so it was a really cool project, and it was very lifelike. There were pores and all the little details that I get to be so meticulous about on my shoots with live humans. This was next level because I got to really dive in and actually create people. It was like a Frankenstein experience because I got to make ears and noses and choose eyeball color and just every little detail I got to make from scratch with this special effects artist, Vincent Van Dyke. And so the reason Tales from the Crypt came up is because Vincent Van Dyke was telling me who his mentor, one of his mentors was, and the name Kevin Yeager came up in this conversation. And I was like, Kevin Yeager, the special effects artist and director from Tales from the Crypt? And he was like, yeah, how do you know? Because it's like such a specific talent that these artisans have, and these craftsmen, it's like such a insular world with these guys. And so he was really surprised that I knew him. It's like going full circle because I feel like a lot of the things that I got into when I was a kid or a teenager, before I ever even knew what photography was, or before I even thought about making a moving picture, all of these experiences that I had when I was younger all have eventually come back full circle. None of them were for naught. It's really cool when that happens. I was months working with Vincent on these, like building these humans from scratch. And I was basically, cause I had this experience when I was 8 years old, and it was such an amazing day. It was like the best day of my life at the time. Just seeing the magic of filmmaking too, because there was no CGI then. It was just, it was all built and made practically. And so to see this this face being attached to this man and to see it start to move and with the animatronic and everything. And then to be able to do that myself with Vincent all these years later. But yeah, that's when the past really, that's when I look back, because it's almost like inevitable that I have to stop and acknowledge that this is pretty fucking cool. There's something going on here that was meant to be. There's a lot of that with my studio and the work that I do. And because I've moved so organically through, the different mediums, and because I'm always following I'm always following what's the most terrifying thing to do next that I can't stop thinking about. And that's always what's led me to the next project. It's like following the terror, but also following the exhilaration that comes with stepping into the unknown. It's always been a part of my process. Every artist has their process, and that's always been a big part of mine, is like, but I have to just follow my nose and it's always sniffing out the next terrifying experience that I can have. And the most exhilarating experience is always what I don't know about and what I don't know how to do well yet, and what I feel like I don't know enough about.
The way you're talking, you can tell how much energy and passion and fierce sense of following your nose and all those things that bring art to life. Those things play such a big part in how we sort of, the back end, what people don't see. It's all that curiosity. You can tell the energy that comes, like I can sort of hear the cogs turning and all the sparks flying in your brain as you're describing all the different mediums that you're working in, and that you, and why they're so important, and almost the amount of respect and appreciation you have for all of them, because I think that's also a huge part of what it takes in order to drive a career and actually make a living from being an artist. You really have to put yourself out there, but equally you have to respect every single person and teammate, because no one gets to create on their own. It takes a visionary to set the course and say, right, this is what I'm looking for. But without, every single person that's involved in the inner workings and the outer workings of what actually brings that to life in the end. I think when an artist or when a visionary entrepreneur acknowledges that and celebrates it, I think it's like fireworks, anything can happen, literally anything.
Anything, yeah.
And I was also thinking, like, you mentioned following the terror, which I love. What scares you? What risks did you take that were worth taking?
It's funny. I didn't used to be scared. I feel like, or maybe I just don't remember, but I don't think that I used to be scared. When I started, I was just in a much smaller bubble of creativity, that I was using my sister a lot. I was literally asking, like, my sister and I were living together. So I would come home with a new light that I had rented that I wanted to test out. And I would plop her down on the floor and start taking pictures of her. And this would happen all the time. Like, one of my favorite pictures I made back then was, we were on a plane, coming back from the East Coast, and I happened to have a wig with me and a costume. I must have planned this, and I just didn't tell her. But right when we were about to land, we were flying over Irvine, and I asked her to throw this dress and wig on really fast. And so we got the city of Irvine, lovely Irvine, in the background, in the window, and she's sitting there in the chair, grumpy from a 6-hour flight. And it's one of my favorite pictures. And so at the time, so back then it was not about following any terror. It was just about opening up the world of photography because I was so inspired. I was looking at other photographers' pictures all the times. I was looking at movies. I was looking at paintings, and I was just trying to, make my own versions of the things that I loved the most. I think that's how every artist kind of starts. And then when it started to become its own thing, or I felt like it was evolving into something more personal to me, that's when terror started creeping in, I think. And then when I started being asked to do public speaking and open myself up more to the world, and my shoots started getting much bigger, and I suddenly didn't know everyone on set because it wasn't just me holding the reflector in one hand and the camera in the other as I'm trying not to fall down the cliff as I'm taking this picture from this certain angle because it had to be that angle. It was everything just opened up, and suddenly I didn't know everyone's names on set. And like I remember my first day walking on set for Despair, my first short film. I walked on set and it was just like fucking people everywhere. And I just wanted to run away. And then I saw Bryce, my actress. I saw her waiting for me in the phone booth set that we had built. And I was like, there's something I know. Not just her, but I knew that little cutout of this set that I was looking at, of all the people that I didn't know and all the equipment and all the huge lights, and just I wasn't for some reason I saw the call sheet. I knew who was coming, but I had no fucking idea what it was going to look like until I got there and what it was going to feel like. And then I saw Bryce and I was like, that I know. So I just walked over to Bryce and I just focused on what I knew because I'd been making pictures like that and I'd been telling stories like that since the beginning with my sister. So I went to what was familiar and I just kept it small and intimate. And then I was able to start looking around and opening my lens a little further to the rest of the world around me. And, but that's when it started to creep in. And I think what terrifies me now is, I actually don't know what terrifies me because, it's like one thing that I kind of say to myself when I'm trying to build, like I have my routines. I found that having routines before I'm about to do a big project, that scares me a lot. Having my routines, following the familiar routines of like, I eat a banana in the morning when I wake up. I pack what I'm going to wear the night before and I fold it up and I put it on top of my shoes I'm going to wear, and I put it there by the door. And I know I'm just going to put that on and go outside and the day is just going to begin. And there's like certain things that I have to do if I'm in a hotel room or if I'm at home. It's always the same routines because, the environment is always different, but I can keep things the same.
I think that makes perfect sense. It's like that inner compass. Look, I don't think it's ever a coincidence what we create and put out to the world is very often not that far in terms of who we are inside of us, Yeah,
it might be that just really trying to put that piece of myself into my work in the same way that the first piece that I saw by William Eggleston resonated with me in that way, where I actually felt his life force within that piece of art. I think, it's putting, because if I didn't care about these projects, then it probably wouldn't terrify me. But I do care. I care a lot. And I care about them because they're a part of me. So not to be too earnest, but, that's what it is.
I've got so much respect for what you're saying because, I think you can only create, not only on the scale that you create, but with the level of detail and precision and the sort of obsessiveness about the veins in the eyeball or the colours of the eyeballs, or the pores. Like I don't know, when you were describing that before, I was thinking, have you got like a skin pores reference? So I don't know, like a Pantone.
I have references for everything.
Is there a moment when you can sort of think where you just thought, my God, if I hadn't have done that, then I wouldn't have been here or there?
Yeah, I think I've had many detours. I met a few people that made a really sharp detour for me in my thinking, because I met a writer, I met a painter. I started hanging out with musicians a lot and going to shows, and I started meeting these people, and I knew this was where I was going to end up somehow. I knew it, but I didn't know what medium. I loved all of them. And so I started just going to shows. I started drawing and painting. I started writing shitty poetry. I just dove into all of it. And I ended up at the Getty Museum, and that's where I saw the William Eggleston photographs, and I bought the William Eggleston's Guide to Photography at the museum bookshop. And that same week, I bought a used camera, Nikon N90S, and I went on eBay and I bought darkroom equipment from this woman who just divorced her husband, and he had been a photographer, and she wanted to get rid of all his shit. And I bought some books at a yard sale on how to make photographs and how to develop and process your own film. And this all happened in a flurry of 1 week after seeing that exhibition. And I told my friend, who was a painter, I told him, I'm going to be a photographer. And he was like, you can't be a photographer. You can't just say this. Like, cause he took his craft very seriously, and he didn't like, people dipping into something because it was cool and then dipping out. So he was like, you can't just say you want to be a photographer. If you're going to be a photographer, you need to learn everything about what it means to be a photographer. And you need to study it and study it in a very serious way, and study it alone. So you're not influenced by anyone else. He said, don't talk to any other photographers for 2 years, because you need to find out what photography means to you, and be a professional. If you're going to be a photographer, be a professional. So I took that to heart, and I didn't hang out with any other photographers. I actually didn't know any other photographers anyway, but I specifically didn't listen to any other photographers when I did meet them out, because I didn't want to hear the bullshit of like what they learned in school that may or may not have been right for me. I didn't want to hear the rules of photography that photographers were supposed to follow in order to start getting from point A to point B to point C. And like, none of that was for me. And I got into photography. Like I said, I had my first show with my friend because she needed me. I was just doing her a favor. And then years later, I tried to get a show at a gallery, and the gallerist, this woman in Los Angeles, I won't name her name because she still has a gallery here, but she told me that I shouldn't be a photographer because she didn't see anything there that was any good for photography, and that I should probably do something else if I want to make a living. And it was such a dramatic thing to hear that it was almost comical, because I had spent all this time making my portfolio. This was 4 years in or something, and I was still very young, but I'd spent all this time making my portfolio and built up to this moment where I was going to see this lady. I booked an appointment and everything. She went through my book, and then that was the result of it. And because it was so rude and dramatic.
It's crushing. It's crushing.
But it wasn't crushing. It should have been crushing. I think that was her intention. But because it was so absurd and preposterous to say to such a young, energetic student, I thought it was just hysterical. And it made me, and it made me be like, well, I'll show her.
Alex, I've got one last question. You can just answer it in one word. What's your secret weapon?
I mean, it's not even very clever. It's just my intuition. Everyone has it. It's not a secret weapon. It's just the intuition, just following my gut or my heart or my nose, whatever you want to call it. That's everyone's secret weapon. And the more you follow it, the louder it gets. So it's like a muscle. You have to use it in order to be able to even hear it. So that's always led me into the places where I need to go to be happy and fulfilled and satisfied.
I follow mine all day, every day, and sometimes it gets me into trouble and sometimes it leads me to the most special places. And genuinely, thank you so much for being so generous. It really means a lot, honestly.
It was so fun. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week. If you like what you just heard, follow us, give us a review and send it to a friend. Say hello on socials at Creative Blood Agency and use the hashtag CreativeBloodPod. This episode was produced by Josie Coulter, engineered and mixed by Ben Beheshti, artwork designed by Sarah Thompson, music by Ben Tarrant Brown, and presented by me, Laura Conway.